Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Rowing Chat. I'm Rebecca Caro, and I started Rowing Chat in 2013 as the podcast network for the sport of rowing. You can find out more and subscribe to get email updates at our website, rowing.chat. Also on that website is the rowing directory. On the menu, you'll see the word directory, and it's like a yellow pages for rowing businesses. So whether you're looking for a new boat, some oars, a rowing gift, whether you're looking for coaching advice, rowing holidays, going on camps, there are lots of different categories, and you can find a lot of amazing suppliers from all around the world to help you on your rowing journey. Now, today, I'm delighted to welcome to Rowing Chat, Michael Morgan. Michael, hello.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Well, I'm very pleased that we're here together because we have Greg Christian to blame, don't we, for introducing us?
We certainly do. I taught Greg at school, coached him at school, and then in latter years coached with him for a while. So,
now, Michael, we can hear from your accent that you're an Australian. Would you tell us a little bit about you and your background in the sport of rowing?
Well, I was the youngest of three boys, and my father had rowed at school at St Ignatius in Sydney, and for a brief while after school. And when my brothers started rowing, he became a rowing coach, part-time, of course, as everyone was then. And so that was the introduction. And yeah, as a young boy, I guess I was dragged along to head of the rivers and regattas. And when I went into year 7 at school, someone advised the year 7 boys that it was going to be the school centenary in 1963, and that the old boys thought it'd be nice to win the head of the river in that year, and they were going to let us all start rowing a year earlier than normal in those days as part of the preparation for that. And they also advised us that they had appointed a new senior coach, a fellow by the name of Tom Chessel, and Tom was the coach and coxswain of the Australian VIII that won the bronze medal at the 1952 Olympics, Helsinki. So with that in mind, I joined a rowing program.
And that was the beginning of a very long story.
Correct. Indeed.
Now, as a young man, your career took you into the Olympic crews for Australia. And of course, times were very different then. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how did a young man get selected for an Olympic 8?
Well, I suppose first off, one leaves school, as I did in 64. And the coach of my school crew in 64 was an Ernest Chapman, who was in the 52 Olympic crew, coached by my coach the year before, Tom Chessel, another 52 Olympian. And somehow the connection between the 52 Olympic crew, when I left school, I got a phone call from the coach of Sydney Rowing Club at the time, a fellow Phil Kaiser, and Phil had been stroke of the 52 Olympic 8 that won the bronze. And so I went down to row, and that was at the end of 64. And Sydney Rowing Club had a 4 at the Tokyo Olympics, which were coached by Phil Kaiser. And so that the connection continued, and I thought maybe if these people can do it, as something that I could aim for.
Now that four included a very famous rowing name, which was Howard Croker.
No,
what was Howard like to row with?
Well, Howard came later.
Okay.
I'd been through the junior cruise at Sydney, and somehow I got a try out for the New South Wales King's Cup crew in '67. They had a squad of 12, which I was in, and when they named the crew, I was one of the 4 left out, and Howard Croker being another one. And so Howard really organised a crew with myself and another 2 fellows to have a go at for the selection regatta for the trip to Canada and the North American Championships in 1967. Well, we formed a crew. We won our race and won it fairly well, but the selectors at the time didn't deem it fast enough to go to the away. But however, out of that 4, Coxless 4, come the next year, Mexico, 3 of us were in the 8, and Howard Croker was there as the boatman for the team, and we used his oars, and it was the first time really that he got on the international stage with his handmade blades, wooden of course, winning the silver medal. And yes, and of course Howard does have long connections in New Zealand. I don't think he is, or maybe only recent years, that he had missed a national championships in New Zealand for a very long time.
Yeah, we always enjoy seeing him over here.
Yes, he's probably one of the most recognisable people on the world rowing stage, Howard.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Remembers everybody and is very careful to say hello to absolutely everybody.
My father coached him in 1956 in the 4th Four at Newington College. So that's where our connection went right back to then.
I was going to say the 1st, 2nd and 3rd fours must have been pretty good. Now, 68 wasn't your only Olympic appearance for Australia. You got a second bite of the cherry. Tell us about 72.
Well, 72, yes, Sydney Rowing Club based crew again. We won the King's Cup and selection for the games, but sadly the 6th man out of the crew, who was a key member, Ian McGuirter, 4 weeks after selection, he was diagnosed with cancer and given 6 months to live. And so he dropped out, of course, and I don't think we were quite ever the same. We trained very hard, and but I guess my gut feeling was the more we trained, we just got better at our faults, and we had a disappointing Olympics.
Yeah. Well, it's always sad when that happens, but being the man that you are, I know that you took advantage of that. And one of the people you met at the Munich Olympics was a man called Freddy Bachmann.
Correct.
Tell us about Freddy.
Well, now Freddy was he was the reserve, I think, for the Swiss team, and when their pair oar, one of the crew had an injury, and Freddy filled in and raced at the Olympics, and they won, I think, perhaps the silver medal. And but the year after the Olympics, I was away on a club tour with Sydney Rowing Club that went to Henley and the Lucerne Regatta, and Mr. Pickwick's bar, that anyone that's been on a rowing team in Lucerne knows Mr. Pickwick's, and we met there. I hadn't met him before, and had a long chat about rowing and technique, and now some of those lessons I took on.
Freddie is a very interesting man because he's pretty small for a heavyweight man, and when you look at the photographs of his crew, he was the stroke and substantially smaller than his bowman, and also the reserve, and pulling off an Olympic silver medal from a seemingly disadvantageous position on 3 counts is incredible. And the reason he did it is because of his insight into the rowing technique. So can you run through Freddy's 3 key things that he taught you?
Okay, I should have looked at my notes for this.
I can help.
As you say, he wasn't a big man, and I was, I suppose, at this stage, I was pretty frustrated with rowing and thinking maybe I was never going to fulfill my ambitions on the pulling an oar, and maybe I would. Has something happened here? Have we gone?
No, this is me being deliberate and sharing your book with the 3 points that you made about Freddy's technique.
Yes, but particularly, yes, he made 3 points, which were pretty simple. The legs were in a compressed state, that when you arrived at the front, that the first part of your leg drive was basically for free, because it was a natural reaction to spring back. And that was very good, provided you timed the entry of the blade with your legs. Pretty basic, but good point. He also made the point that if you accelerate the seat the last few centimetres into the catch, that it does make the boat go forward. And similarly, the movement off the back chocks, if everyone moves off the back chocks at precisely the same time, that it does make the boat go forward. So these were 3 areas that, in a sense, for no effort, that you could make the boat go forward. And they seemed pretty good. And there was a problem though with that when I went home and I started coaching at the end of that year, trying to put all this into the rowing stroke, it was more difficult than I thought. And and we were, I guess, spending a lot of time in the middle of the slide, which while letting the boat run, but it was all right at about 34 strokes to the minute, but a bit harder at higher rates. And but nevertheless, the New South Wales crew, which I was by now coaching in 76, powered down the course, rating 34, and won by nearly 12 seconds at the Australian Championships. But It was all part of a learning curve for this young coach.
Now, I have to reveal that I've met Freddy Bachmann, and I met him courtesy of Harry Mahon. And Freddy loves his rowing. He very generously lent me his spare single, and we went for a row together on Lake Lucerne. And Lake Lucerne is a big lake with lots of little fingers, where a bit like Sydney Harbour, where there are houses and things. And we went around this headland, and 2 things happened. The first thing was that a barge went past carrying a large amount of topsoil and created a very long periodicity wave. And for the first time ever in my life, I surfed on the top of a wave in a single. This effortless rowing where I was just shooting along, which we enjoyed. Harry always said that Freddy's style, he was the most natural sculler that he had ever seen. He said he'd never seen anyone who could move a boat with the fluidity and the lack of check that Freddy could achieve. And so I spent a lot of that outing watching him. And as we went past a further point on this little outing we did together, there was a miniature of the statue of Christ the Redeemer from Rio de Janeiro, on top of the hill with his arms outstretched. And Freddy stopped and waited until I caught up with him. And he said, "You see that statue?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, it was a gift to the people of Lucerne from a very grateful Brazilian whose child came to Switzerland for a health cure and was cured. And he said, but I don't think of it as that. I think of that as Jesus standing there telling us to take our finishes out square.
Yes.
Let's move on then to your schools rowing career. So you became a specialist schools coach. What was it like coaching the young lads and lasses? Well, I suppose it was mostly lads, wasn't it, in those days, in the early 70s?
Until my daughters took up rowing.
So what was the focus like then? How many times a week did they row?
Well, I mean, rowing season was split up into 2 terms. And I guess with the senior boys where, I ended up coaching the first 8 at Newington for 24 or something years, and then Joey's for another 6 years. But generally speaking, certainly term 4 or 3, depending on the change to 4 terms. They rowed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and 2 rows on Saturday.
So 5 times a week.
Generally, as the season progressed, that might increase.
Yeah. And how does that compare with what you perceive the schools are doing nowadays?
Well, look, I see the generation that we're in now, that we see on the world stage that the crews have gone faster and faster, and so has the training volume. I mean, I think as an Olympic rower, I was the whole crew was working, or students, couple, but we generally would we might have rowed a couple of mornings before work, and then after work we'd get on the water at 6 o'clock and finish at 8, 2-hour session. But now they train 3 times a day, the elite athletes, and God knows how many kilometres they're doing, but to be over twice the workload that an athlete in my rowing time did. But one of the difficulties, of course, is that the young coaches that come out of these elite programs and are now back into schools, they have, a schoolboy today has no more time than he did 40 years ago. In effect, he probably has less time. I know simple things like at Newington, where a school used to come out at 3:10 and we would be on the water by 4. Well, I've seen as time has gone on with traffic and everything, they started finishing school a bit later because they needed more time. But boys were getting on the water at 5 o'clock. But they still have to get home and be picked up at a certain time and do homework when they get home, etc. So remember one of the headmasters saying that the boys are time deprived, and well, I guess parents are time deprived too. So they don't have any more time, and I think a lot of the training and the programs that I used 25 years ago are still pretty appropriate, because I've seen with schoolboys, the crews haven't gone any faster in the last 25 years. And which the rest of the rowing scene, well, the times are every year, the prognostic time, the word everyone loves these days, that keeps from Olympics to Olympics, the prognostic times to win the gold medal get faster every Olympics.
Yep. And given that the equipment changes over the past 25 years as well, the boats are lighter, the oars are lighter, they're stiffer. There's a lot of changes there that you're saying were not reflected in the winning schoolboy crew times.
Well, I guess I'm thinking the 90s, where I remember a Newington crew I had, where we we bought a Vespoli 8 from America, and two, we had carbon blades, but cleaver blades didn't come into 92, and that particular crew, they were going under 550 as a schoolboy, and of course we've gone to cleavers since then. But yes, there've been a lot of improvements.
So what are the opportunities and challenges that you see for schools rowing today?
Well, I mean, challenges, water conditions for one. Sydney Harbour, where all our schools are based, the number of pleasure craft on the plus ferries and all of this sort of thing, that a lot of people are spending a lot of time driving to Penrith for rowing camps, etc., where once upon a time, I know in Sydney, I could row the crews up to after school to Parramatta, and with ferries, the waterways became restricted, etc., and it's hard to keep the kilometres up that you need to do.
Are there positives in this scenario, Michael?
Well, there are positives. There is that thing that someone cleverly invented, the Row Perfect rowing machine, and which is the closest thing to me to simulate what the real stroke is. And I know at Newington, I encouraged them to, they got 16 in the end Row Perfect machines, and to me, the opportunity then was that I think there is a need now to simulate on land what you can do on the water, and with the Row Perfect, it's a great way to head that way. I mean, I know cycling, for instance, is a big part of elite programs, but with work health and safety and all these sort of things, it's pretty risky business sending kids on a 50-kilometre bike ride, with the fear of accidents, etc. But you can, I guess, replace the you can run and all these things to keep up the endurance training, but you still somehow got to pull on the oar.
So the only thing it doesn't teach you is how to handle the blades.
Correct. Well, I don't think there is the same focus on technique now, as you've read in my notes. The Rusty Robertsons of the world and etc. There was so much time spent on technique, where these days while it's important, it tends to take a little bit of a back seat when it comes to the importance of endurance training.
That's a very interesting observation, because Australian crews across the board have a reputation for being great technicians. And you're saying that you think this is fading somewhat?
Look, I think it's fading at perhaps at school level at times. That when you've let's face it, at the national team, as I say, they're full-time athletes, and yes, they can do one technical session, but they will do 2 35-kilometre rows around the technical session. Now that's a different world.
It certainly is. So I'm going to give you a magic wand. What do you see as the future for schools rowing in Australia?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm a bit out of it now, but I think I'm just in the old fuddy-duddy when it comes to what schools think. Yeah, I've learned they're not going to take much notice of me. And
well, then you can tell me and I'll take some notice. Never mind the rest of them.
Well, look, I don't think what we were doing, as I've said 25 years ago, was such a problem. There was, not so much interval training, but the training, there was perhaps more anaerobic training. I mean, for the Kiwis, Rusty Robinson, who, great mentor of mine, I mean, 2100 metre sprints after rowing with a 10-second interval in between. Well, I bet not too many do that anymore. And again, Tor Nielsen, I attended a seminar in New Zealand where he was the keynote speaker, and the programs that he advocated, I think all those things are still very, very good. And you're just rating 18 to 20 and doing kilometres. A schoolboy needs to do more than that, in my belief.
So less time, more intensity. Is that because the kids are sort of quite fit anyway because they do other sports and they ride bikes and run around, or is it just that the demand of the race doesn't require that very long endurance base?
Well, the fact is they just don't have the time to do it. While I still believe, I always reckon that if I wanted to win the marathon, the best thing I could do was run more miles than all the other kilometres. Well, that's where rowing is today. Have a look at the Kiwi pair and that was so successful. I did have Eric Murray over to my club. I brought him over and he stayed with me for a few days. It was a fundraising dinner and we bought a new Empacher 8 thanks to Eric being the draw card that he is.
Fantastic. What a great opportunity.
Yes.
Michael, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. Your perspective on rowing and the immense changes that have happened over your life and your carefully measured observations of what you can see and what you believe the outcomes are a great illustration for the rest of us that we can all take back to our own club situations. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Rebecca, let me say I'm somewhat flattered that you'd even bother to interview an old fellow like me.
There's a lot we can all learn from the old fellows. Trust me, this is why I do the podcast.
Good stuff. Okay.
So this has been the Rowing Chat podcast. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Please tell your friends. And if you have a moment, write a review on your podcast app so that we can get more people listening to rowing podcasts.